What's up, and welcome to the That's So Rich podcast, the show that's redefining wealth and helping you manifest a life that is rich in every single way. I'm your host, Kat Cozadd, transformation coach, manifestation expert, and spiritual guide, and together we're going to create your happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest life. I'm so happy you're here. Let's do this thing. Oh my goodness. What's up, my friends? I am so happy to be back on the That's So Rich podcast. If you're brand new here, welcome to your first episode of the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here listening. I'm your host, Kat Cozadd. And for all of you who have been with me throughout this journey since it was the No Bullshit Manifestation Show and then the official launch of That's So Rich back in September of 2024, and then have patiently waited for me to come back after this 4-month break. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited for us to dive back into all of the richness, all of the goodness that I have for you on the show. And I just wanted to use this episode as an opportunity to talk about reclaiming wealth on your own terms. Because if I'm being completely honest with you, this is the journey that unknowingly for a period of time and then knowingly for the last year or so have known I've been on. And it has been one of the most challenging, one of the most messy, one of the most incredible, one of the craziest experiences of my life thus far. And I want to talk about it on today's podcast episode because back when I relaunched the podcast in September of 2024, there was so much that I was ready for mentally. It felt like mentally I was moving a million miles a minute and I had undergone this transformation and I was ready to bring so much of my learnings, my teachings, what I had gone through, the embodiment of it all to the surface. But my body wasn't ready for it. My body had undergone so much trauma, so much change, so many transitions in such a short period of time that I had to take the time to integrate everything that I had walked through in these past few years, as well as honestly just live life, have fun. It's not serious all the time. And that's part of what makes it so damn rich. But I wanted to, again, thank you all for being here and let you know that we are back. You know that? You know that TikTok sound that's like, we are back, baby. We are back. I actually just made a TikTok with it today. It's from The Hangover. It's not originally a TikTok sound, nor is any TikTok sound. I don't know. You guys let me know. But it's originally from The Hangover when they're all driving to Vegas, that they're driving back to Vegas in The Hangover 2, I believe that it is. And if you're like, Kat, what the fuck are you talking about? Fair point. We don't have to talk about The Hangover here. But regardless, I'm talking about that sound that's like, we are back. That's how I feel. I feel like we are back. We are back. We are back. We are back. I am so fucking excited to be back. And so, like I said, I'm going to use this podcast as an opportunity to just share with all of you the importance of reclaiming wealth in your own life, because this has been one of the most profound journeys that I've been on for myself. And so to kick this off, I want to bring it back to, I guess, the beginning of my intentional manifestation journey very briefly, but then really hit on 2022. So I started my intentional manifestation journey back in 2019. Around this time in 2019, I'm recording this mid-June, and my life changed so drastically, so quickly. I was 23 years old at the time. I had just moved across state lines for the first time. I had undergone years and years and years and years and years of trauma without ever processing any of it. And I was at my rock bottom moment where I was $70,000 in debt. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was working a dead-end job that I hated. I didn't know who I was. And I dove headfirst into manifestation, law of attraction, spirituality, all of that good stuff. And I just started sharing about it. And through sharing about it, I attracted an audience. And it was incredible because this thing that was helping me finally start to understand myself for the first time in my life, finally feel like I had agency and ownership over who I was and how I got to show up for the world and what I got to bring to the table was bringing me so much purpose and bringing me so much light. And it continued to for a really long time. And it still does to this day. This isn't like a fuck manifestation moment. It's like, yeah, absolutely. Everything is manifestation. But it was so new and it was so novel to me. And I started my business and I started making a ton of money. I went from making $8.25 an hour to making over $100,000 in the span of less than 10 months. It was like a 6 month, 8 month period where I was working my job and I was making $8.25 an hour to making over six figures. And all at the age of then 24, it was so crazy because I hadn't calibrated to any of that yet. I hadn't fully found my identity, my regulation, my self in that level of wealth. And I also did it on somebody else's terms. I was working with business coaches. I was working with manifestation coaches. I was working with so many fucking coaches because that's what, at least at the time, the coaching industry was like shoving down your throat. Like, you need a coach for every single aspect of your life. And if you have a coach for every single aspect of your life and you love it, props to you. If you have a coach for every single aspect of your life and you're not doing it from a place of trusting yourself, this podcast episode in general is going to be an invitation to check yourself and to come back to, are you living your life by somebody else's rule book or are you living it on your own terms? And so for me at the time, I was, yes, in part living my life on my own terms, creating my dreams, my desires, moving in a way that on the surface was mine, but underneath the surface was rooted and coded in other people's rules of how I had to show up for business, of what I had to do financially, of just all of these different things. It was very performative for me for a period of time. And I didn't even realize it because, again, there hadn't been this moment of like checking in with myself and slowing down and having these questions of what does wealth mean to me until June of 2022. June of 2022 and 2022 in general was the year that I have seen the biggest financial success of my business thus far. Since 2022, I haven't made as much money as I made in 2022, but I was making more money monetarily than I ever had before. And I had one of the most traumatic experiences of my life thus far, which was there was one person, and I won't name them, and I'm not going to ever name them because I think that there's something to be said in giving people their experiences and not having to put them on blast. But there was a person in my life, one of the most important people in my life, who I thought backed me in every single thing that I did, who I thought was really happy for me in what it was that I was creating. And it was the absolute opposite of that. And we ended up having a massive falling out where this person told me that they hope I crash and burn, that they think I'm a cult leader, that I'm gypping people, that I'm like a fraud, that all of my insecurities and all of my wounds were being projected into what I was doing, and that at the core, I was just still this sad, insecure girl who was always trying to prove herself to other people. And my initial reaction to that experience was, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to say, fuck you. I can do what it is that I want to do in an even bigger way than I ever have before. And so I started to work my ass off and scale my business, my finances higher, higher, greater, greater than I ever had before. I put my business and work and money above everything else. And I was latching onto my worthiness being determined and defined by how much money I had in my bank account. And so I got to the end of 2022 and I looked back on the year. 2022 is also the year that I got sober. It was also the year that I officially decided that I was going to plant roots in New York City. It was like so many things had happened all at once. I wasn't prioritizing my health. I was, like I said, building my life, my business, everything by somebody else's rule books. And when I say somebody else, it's like part of that being coaches that I was working with at the time, but other part of it being like Instagram, social media, all of the big business gurus in the industry of like Alex Hermosi or Ed Milet or Tony Robbins or any of these like big Grant Cardone, like these super hyper masculine dudes. I'm not shitting on them, but I'm like, I'm just a girl. Like, I'm just a girl from teeny tiny Colorado. I'm not this like super masculine guy who can run business in this way, but I was running my life, running my business, running my schedule, running the way that I treated myself based off of what they were saying because I saw them as so successful. I saw them as these giants that were making a ton of money. And again, at the time, my worth, my worthiness, I was determining by how much money I had in the bank account, even though consciously I was telling myself that wasn't true. And so, fast forward to the end of 2022, and I had this moment beginning of 2023 that I stopped, I paused. I was like, I am monetarily the richest that I have ever been, and I feel the most broke. I feel the most poor. I feel so broken down and beaten down and sad and lonely and like I've built this castle for myself that nobody else is sitting in because I haven't prioritized any other aspect of my life for the past 2 years. And so there I was, again, monetarily, most successful that I had ever been, looking around and being like, what the fuck is the point of any of this? What is the point of having this business? What is the point of having this money? What is the point of all of the luxury experiences and the things that I have done over the past few years if there's nobody to share it with and there's not this deep connection to myself where independent of these things, I actually genuinely love myself. And I want to pause there for a moment because I think that a lot of the times in the inner work, in the spiritual work, in the manifestation work, it's really easy to look at these external things, look at the money, look at the car, look at the house, look at the luxury experiences, look at the partner, look at the financial gain, look at the business, whatever it is, and say, yeah, I'd be okay with that. Or I'd be okay without that. And the reality is like, but would you? Would you actually be okay if every single thing that you had was stripped from you? Would you actually be okay with what stands at the end of the day and what standing being just you? And from that point, so also beginning of 2023, I entered into, and I didn't know it at the time, I entered into my Saturn return, which for anybody who's listening, that's like, what does that mean? A Saturn return essentially is an astrological phenomena or theory that the planet of Saturn returning to the position that it was in when you were born. And the planet Saturn, I don't want to ruin it by giving my own interpretation of this because I'm going to fuck it up. But essentially, the planet Saturn is a ruler of truths in your life. And for me, my Saturn is located in my first house. And the first house for me is identity. And so when Saturn is making a return to the position that it was in when you were being born, essentially what happens is you undergo a period of time where whatever house it's in, you go through a purification of that. So, beginning of 2023, I entered into unknowingly this astrological period of purification where my identity, my house of self worth, my house of self concept was about to undergo this massive purification. And boy, did it do that. So, from March of 2023 to May of 2025, I was in this period of time where it felt like anything and everything that could have challenged my concept of self came to the surface. So the way that I was identifying my worth completely on external validation, external results, how much money I was making, how much quote unquote success I had, how many dates I could go on, all of these different things just to prove my worth to myself from the external. A lot of that felt like two things with this. One, a lot of it felt like it was kind of being like ripped away from me, almost like the universe, God, source, spirit was like, what happens if we take this away from you? And second part of this is that I subconsciously, unconsciously, and even consciously sometimes was tearing down the castle that I had made for myself. I was in this period of time where, again, I had played by somebody else's rule book for such a long time that all of those areas of my life that I had been playing by other people's rule books, I started to burn it down. So, my business, the systems, the structures, the things that I had doing, I like tore it down. There's a period of time that I didn't even work because I was like, do I want to do this at all? And was basically in the space where all I had the capacity for was making sure that my clients were highly taken care of and were getting what they needed from me, from our calls, from the support that they get. But aside from that, I wasn't putting or pouring anything into it because I almost wanted it to be burnt down so that I could rebuild it. At the time, I didn't know that I wanted to rebuild it. I toyed around with the idea of leaving my business completely, of going back and getting a job, of starting different companies, all of these different things. And as I was burning it down, there was just so much that was coming to the surface. And I want to say, yes, I've been through more traumatic things in my life. There's so many things that happened in childhood, in my teen years, in my early 20s that were incredibly like big T traumatic. And for all of those experiences that I had in the past that were traumatic, I was either numbing out or dissociating or disconnecting from it in some sort of way because I didn't have the tools to process trauma at the time. Whereas this season, I wasn't numbing to anything. I was facing all of it head on and trying to do it with a incredibly dysregulated nervous system. And there were times that, to be completely honest, I felt like the universe, God, source, spirit, whatever this higher power is, was playing a sick joke on me. There were moments that like quite literally actually physically brought me to my knees. Actually like right here if you're watching the video version of this, right here. My knees were down on the side right here. I laid my head right here. I was screaming, I was kicking, I was crying. I was like, God, show me why. Like, why? What the fuck is all of this trying to teach me? And the thing that I had to recognize during this period of time is that I was so used to being able to, again, validate myself, validate my worthiness, validate this internal relationship I had to myself by the external, by the money, by the business, by the dates, by the things that I was doing, by the friendships, by all of these external things. And without those things validating my internal experience, it brought me back home to myself, but not without the old coping mechanisms, not without the old protection mechanisms, not without the old patterns, kicking and screaming and crying and trying to make their way to the surface for one last go before I said goodbye to them. So, specifically, what that looks like for me is that I tried to work harder. I tried to hustle more. I tried to produce more. I tried to just like do anything I possibly could to get myself out of those situations. I threw tens of thousands of dollars at solutions that never brought me what I thought was going to come from it because there's nothing external from me that could have brought me to what I actually needed. There was nothing external from me that could have actually brought me to the place of returning back home to myself, looking at my life, looking at my relationship to money, looking at my relationship to the universe, source, spirit, God, and finally deciding for myself what wealth means to me, what my worthiness means to me, who I am independent of all of the external validation, independent of all of the, okay, Kat, you're doing a good job, or whatever, all of these things that I had put so much weight and so much worth into for such a long period of time. And I can say now, in retrospect, did not feel like it in the moment. It was the best possible thing that could have happened to me. Going through an experience where it felt like one, myself was tearing it down, burning it down, kicking, screaming, throwing a tantrum. And then two, it felt like the universe, source, spirit, God was also taking away from me the things that I refused to let go of. Best thing that's ever happened to me. Because although it felt like a portal of pain at the time, it was actually just a portal of purification. It was an experience and a time of me being able to redefine again what wealth means for me, what my values are, who I am at my core, use my voice, share my voice, get to know myself on a deeper level than I ever have before, set the boundaries that I wasn't setting, and learn to live life independent of somebody always saying, oh, here's a 5-step plan, or, oh, if you do this, then this, then this, it's going to give you this result. By following somebody else's strategy, by doing it in a way that wasn't authentic to me. It was a journey of radical, radical self-trust, and it humbled me in ways that I had no clue that I could be humbled. But here, on the other side of it, I can tell you with every ounce of myself through this experience of having to and being forced to essentially let go of other people's definition of what it means to be rich, of what it means to live the dream life, of what it means to have a successful business or to be financially savvy or whatever the fuck, all of these different definitions that everybody and their mom are trying to push down your throat. I finally feel like the richest version of myself that I have ever felt. Not only monetarily, but also in every single aspect of my life. I was given, although it did not feel like it at the time, the opportunity to rewrite and redefine on my own terms what wealth is for me. And that is exactly why we are here on this podcast, to redefine wealth on your own terms, to stop using somebody else's playbook, to stop depending on the voices and opinions of other people to tell you how you should be living your life in the most authentic and rich way. Because let's be real for a second. The world gives us a very flawed and limited perception of what it means to be quote unquote rich, what it means to be quote unquote wealthy. As y'all know, I live in New York City. I interact with rich people all the time. I interact with millionaires, multimillionaires, even some billionaires. And I have met some of, in my life, the richest people I have ever encountered when it comes to their finances. And I have also encountered some of the poorest people in terms of all of the other aspects of their lives. And that's not to shit on those people. That's to say, the world has failed us in this way of defining what wealth means as numbers in your bank account, as the income that you are making every single month, as what you do or do not have in terms of your investments or your assets. And it's so fucking lame that that's how the world has given us this definition, because there is so much more that makes life rich than those numbers. And again, that's why we're here. That's what this podcast is about, because it's those exact teachings from the world that are keeping people poor, not just in your bank account, but in all aspects of your life, and especially in your relationship to yourself. So if you're tuning into this podcast and you're like, well, fuck, I got all the way to the end of this podcast episode, and I thought that this podcast was going to give me all of the answers on how I can live a rich life. Sorry, honey, you're wrong. That is the exact opposite of what this podcast is here to do. This podcast is not for you if you want all of the answers handed to you. If you think you want to live life by my rule book, this podcast is not for you. But if you're the kind of person who knows that you were made for more, if you are the kind of person who is willing to go deep, deeper than any of the surface level shit out there, if you are the kind of person who wants long-lasting, sustainable wealth that is built from the inside out on your own terms, then that is what this podcast is about, and this podcast is going to be for you. So here's my invitation to you. My invitation for you is that between now and the next podcast episode, I want you to think about, what does wealth mean to you currently, and how does it feel? What does wealth mean to you currently, and how does it feel? If it does not feel 100% aligned and supportive to you, that is not your definition of wealth. That is a definition of wealth that has been handed to you. And understand where that definition comes from. Does it come from your mom, your dad, your primary caregivers? Does it come from the society that you grew up in, the town, the city that you grew up in? Does it come from some influencer that you saw talking about something? Does it come from Dave Ramsey? Does it come from any of these financial gurus that are blaming you or shaming you into thinking different things about yourself and about your finances? Where does it come from? And once you identify where the old, outdated definition of wealth comes from for you, your invitation is to rewrite the new one, to start to explore, to start to play, to start to peel back the layers of wealth. Because again, it's not just those numbers in your bank account. Of course, it gets to be. Of course, we're going to talk about money on this podcast. But we're also going to talk about the other stuff, because the other stuff is just as important as the money that you want in your life and that you are calling into your life. And like I've been talking about from personal experience of this massive purification process that I have been through over the past few years, of truly coming home to myself and seeing the depth, the riches, the connection, just the absolute beauty of life independent of money and with money. This is going to be one of the most profound and beautiful journeys that you get to go on. And I am so glad that you clicked on this podcast episode today to let me be one of the guides on your journey, because I will never be the guide that is going to tell you what to do, but I will always be the guide that invites you back home to yourself to figure it out on your own terms. I've done it the other way too many times, like I've talked about in this podcast episode, where I have just taken the advice of other people blindly and expected that to give me a life that is authentic to me. And the reason I am so fucking passionate about you not doing that is because I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way that it is not actually easier to listen to experts and gurus and all of these people who claim that if you do this, then that is exactly what your life is going to be. You are going to have, be, do everything that you want. But lies, incorrect, not true, because eventually, yeah, maybe you'll have those things, but they won't feel as satisfying or as authentic or as real to you as it is and it will be if it is coming from your own energy, if it is coming from your own internal guidance system, if it is coming from your own truth. Again, that is why we're here, because this podcast is here to guide you back to your truth, not my truth, your truth. So, with that passionate rant being done, I want to invite you to, once you find your own definition of wealth, I want you to share it with someone. Not so that they can adopt your definition of wealth, but to invite them to explore their definition of wealth. And as you do this, share on your Instagram stories, share on your TikTok, share wherever it is that you share. And please be sure to tag me and or the podcast. You can find both of the Instagram handles for those down below in the show notes. But share this message, because the more that we can illuminate and light up the knowing inside of other people that wealth is not just the numbers in your bank account, the more we move towards a world where we are all experiencing more abundance, more money, more goodness, more of holistic wealth. So, like I said, please be sure to share this on your stories, to explore these different things, to come tell me about them over on Instagram. I get back to all of my DMs, and to invite other people into this as well. We're on this journey together. And like I said, I'm so glad that you chose this podcast. You chose me as one of your guides to help you get there. That's all that I have for you on today's podcast episode, and I will chat with you on the next one.